Hello and welcome aboard the Sun Country Pilots Podcast. I'm your host, Captain Tyler Lauer. This week, we get to sit down with your MEC, Captain Sam Larson, and dive into the newly announced proposed merger with Allegiant Airlines and the role that ALPA and your MEC is going to play as we begin this lengthy process ahead. So, Sam, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to sit down with me and talk all things MEC and merger.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So we'll dive right into here. So it's January 11th, and you get a phone call, presumably from management, and you get some big news. Why don't you kind of talk to me about your initial response, how that kind of made you feel, and what happened?
The MEC was notified about 28 minutes prior to the email going out to make this completely public. Management said that this deal came together very quickly. That was about all that they said. Let's just kind of hear this is what's happening. So we had a few questions. What does that mean for our crews? Minneapolis, was a big topic there. How big is it going to be? What the flying is going to be like, that kind of stuff. They didn't have any answers to that right away. They just said, hey, this was just being announced. There's a lot to come, a lot of information that has to still be, worked out. So that was the initial reaction or the questions that we had on January 11th. That day. We did see, we saw the landscape of the airline industry kind of changing in the past few years. So we did do a little bit of preparation. It was in our strategic plan that a possible merger was going to happen, not maybe, right? We're a small airline. We're profitable. It makes us kind of, I don't want to say a target, but could be acquired, right? Especially with the JetBlue Spirit merger that didn't go through, of where those two airlines were going to be at. So we did do a little bit of, preparation for that. We got outside counsel for the SLI process. We were just so happened that week that the merger was announced was a week that we were going to stand up our merger committee and make that, and volunteers to come out. So again, the MEC didn't know any of this, that this was going to happen, but we were already, we already saw the landscape out there changing. So, and then once we knew that, we just kind of jumped into our plan that we had with ALPA National. And away we went.
Yeah. So why don't you explain to me kind of the support you have with ALPA National? I know in the P2P meetings, you kind of talked about, being able to reach out to people that have gone through these process or different airlines. What sort of support do you have as the MEC as we start diving into this process?
Yeah. So ALPA National it's a tremendous support for us, right? They have vast amount of knowledge on mergers in the merger arena. They've been through, I don't even know how many now, dating all the way back, mid 80s, 90s, early 2000s, as recent as, the Alaska Virgin merger. There was the Alaska Hawaiian merger, obviously the failed JetBlue Spirit merger, and then the most recent one, which is Mesa Republic prior to the Sun Country announced merger. So they have just a vast amount of knowledge. They even have a section 45, the admin manual specifically for mergers. They've done countless numbers of them, and there's a time-tested process there that we do have. So that knowledge is there. The resources that ALPA National has. Not only just on the legal department, right? We have outside counsel, like I said before, but ALPA National has their own legal department, the representation department. We have a whole comms department, website design, production team. The list could go on and on. ENFA, which is Economic and Financial Analysis department, safety department. There's so much resources that ALPA National does provide, and then we can tap into is the big thing. You kind of hit, one of the other ones is we can be in communication, right? I've been in communication with the Hawaiian MEC, Alaska MEC, JetBlue MEC, all these MECs that have been, or at least started that merger process. We can just, we call them up. Hey, what did you guys do? What worked for you? What does typical companies do? And that again, each merger is a little bit different, but there is a framework out there, and we can, tap into that, knowledge and resources. I just want to give a shout out to the team. I think it was 3 or 4 days after this announcement, we had a website up and running. We had an educational video come out a couple days prior or after that. We had our first all pilot call. That in itself is just a huge accomplishment. So I want to go a shout out to our team, not only at National, but our internal team here at Sun Country ALPA. They did a fantastic job, getting this started. There's going to be more coming out. There's the second video just came out, and there's more to come on that. That's one of our big things is education about this process, because a lot of our pilots may not have been through a merger yet.
Yeah, I for one haven't. This is my first airline with ALPA. and still relatively new in my career. So it's a little nerve wracking. It's a lot of unknown ahead, and I'm excited to be a part of the comms committee now and doing these podcasts. I kind of feel like I get a little bit of the back door and working with some of the people at Alpha National and even within communications. We've got people that have been with Alpha for a long time, and so it's been fun to kind of talk to those people. But I think you're right. The education's huge now, and for me personally, as many questions as we can get answered, that's important. But I think it's important that we're getting the correct information out and getting ahead of that. Will Outlaw and I kind of talked about that, where it's really important that we push the information that we know and we try not to speculate. As pilots, we're really good about speculating and giving our 2 cents on stuff. So it's very important that we know what we know, and the stuff that we don't, we work towards. We try to get that information, and we work towards answering those questions and just kind of take it in stride. Nothing's going to happen super fast, but it's important that we're informed on what's going on.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, in that realm of resources available, this is kind of a different merger, right? This is an Alpa and Teamsters pilot groups that are kind of merging. I know that can add some level of complexity. Have you been able to talk with anybody at IBT yet and just at least introduce yourself, kind of test the waters a little bit, see how that relationship is?
Yeah, no, I've been in contact with Ryan, is his name. He's the exec co-president, so basically our MEC chair over there. We're in regular communication, at least once a week. We communicate, what's going on over there, what's going on over here. What is our management telling us? What is, their management telling them, right? It's interesting to hear what they hear, and then from our perspective, they're interested in what we hear as well. They're in Section 6, just like we are in Section 6, so there's a lot of commonality there with what they're getting told on their side. But the MEC just met with their entire board. So basically their MEC just a few days ago. And it was very good. It was very productive. We all had, real good questions on, what does operations look like? What are their plans, going forward, especially what the company is trying to do going forward. Again, they're getting the same kind of generic answers as us. So right now, I don't think until this financial transaction closes that we're going to really get concrete, answers on what is route structure, how is that going to change? Are we going to go to maybe more turns? Like all of those questions have yet to be answered because, to be honest, I don't even know if their management knows that yet.
Like you said, it's a very complex situation, but it's good that we're having these conversations. At the end of the day, in a few years, these are going to be our peers. This is going to be one pilot group. And so I think it's really important, and it's good to hear it from a line pilot's perspective, like myself, that you guys are having this conversation now, and that there's similar concerns on both sides. And for me, that kind of hopes that this process is going to be as painless as possible. I know there's going to be a lot of pain. Obviously, there's going to be growing pains. It's going to go the way it's going to go, but we got two sides of the party that both care, and I think that's really important. That message gets pushed out.
Yeah,
so
100%. We're gonna. At the end of this process, we will be one, and we have to be unified throughout that process. And what's important to them is also important to us. What's important to us is also important to them. So I do really want to, have that, be out there. Is we both are listening to each other on what's important for both, pilot groups to eventually at the end be one.
So we've had a little bit of time for the dust to settle here. What are some of the things that the MEC has done since that January 11th date? What sort of stuff have you done other than, talking with Alpha National? Is there some internal stuff that you've been meeting with, maybe the negotiations committee, the merger committee? How much, work is being done at that level with just like the Sun Country guys?
Yeah, I mean, we're always in contact with our committees, right? I mean, we stood up the merger committee, as you heard from Will. Will is the chair. Lindsay Dunham is going to be helping out, as well as Tim Palish is also on that committee too. So that's the three. We will be pulling in other SMEs, right? So some other pilots have been, through mergers as well, so using their resources throughout this project, process. So that's three is the core, but there's going to be more people helping out on that. The NC, so negotiating committee, we're always in contact with them of how negotiations are progressing. We just got 3 sections, TA 19, 20, 21, which is really good. So those are progressing. We'll see here. I think they have in a few weeks, they'll have another negotiating session there. So it'll be, we're keeping tabs on that. But the one thing is, all the services that were provided prior to this announcement are still going to be there. That's one of the big things that the MEC is. We're coordinating not only with, Teamsters and, Allegiant, the representation of Allegiant pilots, but, internally as well, saying, hey, we are not going to stop what we've been doing. We're going to continue doing that throughout this process and hopefully even further than that. So that's one of our big things in the next 6 months, year, 18 months, right? I mean, this, like you said before, it takes a long time to go through this process. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that the service we provided prior is the service we're going to provide, going forward, right? We're always going to be, looking out for the pilots' careers, the safety, the career progression, things along those lines. Education is the big one, right? I mean, we have to, get every pilot up to speed on this process, right? So you guys can make the decisions that you're going to make with your life. If that's, I hope everyone stays here, but there are other opportunities out there, especially with the majors hiring as much as they're going to hire, at least what they said this year. So keeping the pilots informed on this process, right? Of what does this timeline look like? Educating them, where are we at in that process? What's going on? What is the company saying, right? The facts have to come out of where we are in that process. So I think that's number one. Number two is, like I said, coordination, not just internal, but, with the Teamsters at Allegiant. We have to be in coordination. We have to have that going into the JCBA, right? Which kind of transitions to the last one, is the unity, right? We have to be unified. We have to show management, hey, there's no cracks here. We are in lockstep going into that JCBA process, because like we said, we are going to be one at the end of this. And that is the key, is being unified through that. And I think, being transparent, education, and, just coordination is the three big things that make us unified. And I have, put the directive, or the MEC has put the directive out there to be as transparent as we can. Obviously, there's some things we can't say, negotiation in public and things along those lines, but as much information as we can give you is what we're going to give. We're not here to hide anything. We're very open and transparent on that. So that answered that question.
Very good. Yeah, no, it's a lot going on. It's a complex situation, and I know, like I said, timelines are going to change, but kind of looking forward now, next 6 months to a year, 18 months as the MEC, what does that kind of look like? I know that, like you said, we're in Section 6, and, I'm hoping to do a podcast with the negotiations committee and talk to them, because I know their job's split now. It changed seemingly overnight, just like yours, but we have our own pilot group to maintain, but now we kind of got to look at, like you said, that unity and merging into another pilot group. But what's that next 6 months to a year look like for you and for us as the pilots?
Yeah, right now we kind of hit on a lot of that, but education and coordination are the first two things we have. I mean, the companies come out, they're trying to get the deal closed. Until then, there's not really too much other than coordination with the Teamster side of it. On internal, Sun Country, yeah, we're in Section 6 right now. That's going to continue under the RLA. Both parties in good faith have to try to come to an agreement. That's what it says. And we are 100% behind that. We will forge, forward and try to make, gains to this pilot group. So that's kind of the 6 months to a year. After the year, it's going to probably change a little bit. And that's where, the JCBA, so Joint Collective Bargaining Agreement, starts coming in. There's a TPA, Transition Process Agreement somewhere in there. Once we start getting, concrete dates and when we're going to meet and negotiate, then we'll put that out to the pilot group in coordination with the Teamsters.
Yeah. So we threw that TPA, that pilot agreement, we kind of throw that term around a little bit, and I'll get into this with the negotiations committee a little bit, but can you kind of explain what a TPA is, just at the base level, for us pilots that kind of worry about this stuff?
Yeah, TPA is basically a roadmap of how the merger is gonna kind of play out, right? It's gonna have timelines, different things like, here, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this in this order. Is basically what a TPA, or Transition Process Agreement, is. That's at the base level. That's what it is. I don't want to go too far into it. It can get complex, but at the base level, foundation level, that's what it is.
So who sets that up? Is that something between the MECs, between the negotiations committee? Do you guys have outside representation that helps you with that? Is that a lengthy I'm sure it's a lengthy process, but can you kind of allude to the process of getting that in place?
Yeah, it's actually between Sun Country ALPA, Teamsters, Allegiant, and Allegiant's managed and Sun Country's managed. So all four parties are in the room, negotiating this, and all four parties sign that at the end of the day, if if we can come to an agreement. So it does take a bit of time. There's a lot of coordination. It keeps coming back to that, but there's a lot of coordination as it go not just between the two unions, but also the two companies as well. So it can sometimes take a little bit of time to do that. So like I say, there's not a short process, right? I mean, Alaska Hawaiian right now is at their just over 2-year mark. And they're still not quite to that JCBA yet. So
yeah, that's a long road ahead for sure. Well, for the pilots, what can we be doing as we start going down this path? We kind of talked unity, maybe as the MEC, what kind of advice do you have for us as we start, deep diving into this process over the next 6 months to a year?
yeah, just be be sensitive, right, to Allegiant, right? Again, we're eventually going to be one, right? So I'm not saying don't talk to them. That's what I'm saying. Go talk to them, right? Have a conversation with them. What's going on with them? What are their concerns? What are they seeing from their management, right? I mean, we're all pilots at the end of the day. We go up, we go down, and we get from one place to another, right? Do we do it a little bit different? Yes, but what are their concerns? It is the big thing, and we have to be very sensitive to that. I know our CBA is different than their CBA. Doesn't mean that one's doesn't address their needs or concerns, or ours does. It's a very fluid, conversation, and in coordination with Teamsters, that's what we have to eventually get to is with the JCBA. I think this MEC and would like to see them get a contract right for the pilot, and I think that would benefit not only them but us as well. So we're behind them. Anything we can do to in coordination with them to help, we're here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on that sentiment, I think it's that message of unity, but a good solid contract on their end that's a good foundation for everybody. Pilots moving into this process, so it's all very important to kind of band together and like you said, show no cracks in the foundation. That's big, and not just between the pilot. Not just for us as we're in Section 6, but all pilots across the board. So it's exciting. It's nerve wracking, but it's interesting times ahead for all of us. That's for sure. So,
yeah.
Well, good. Do you have any little final tidbits for the pilot group? Anything to keep an eye out for? Last piece of advice before we part ways today?
The big thing I want to just end that is trust, right? Trust that the MEC is still here. We're working tirelessly for the pilots. We're fighting, representing, protecting everything that we've built so far and what's going to be built, in the future. We were caught a little off guard on a Sunday, a little bit when the announcement happened, but we prepped, a little bit prior. We were in a good position, going forward, and we're going to continue to coordinate with, our counterparts, at the Teamsters who represents Allegiant, and just trust that we're here. We're still fighting for the pilots, and that will not ever waver throughout this whole process. So just know that it is the big kind of message at the end of the day.
Very good. Well, Sam, again, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule, sit down and talk with me about the MEC, what you're up to, and kind of just, this kind of groundwork for this merger process. I know you guys are going to be pedal to the metal moving forward, but I look forward to talking with you more, especially in the future as we get more information. I think this is a nice platform to get information out to pilots and just sit down and have a conversation about it. And yeah, thanks again. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For the rest of the pilots listening, if there's any other topics you'd like to hear more about, please send a dart to the Communications Committee. Don't forget to like and follow us on social media. Please check the Sun Country MEC website and our merger website for updates. Don't be afraid to reach out to those P2P volunteers with the red lanyards. And as always, fly safe, fly the contract.